Hello, friends, and welcome back to Ask Abby Dreyer. Last week, we talked about holding others accountable for hurting you. And in that video, I mentioned having to own your own feelings. And I wanted to get into that a little bit this week because owning your own feelings is hard. It takes a lot of self-awareness to understand where your emotions are coming from some of the time. Because it's really easy to blame the current situation on how you're feeling, but there are so many more variables than that. Are you hungry? Are you tired? Are you living in the middle of a global pandemic? Are your, kids exhausted? Is your spouse exhausted? Are your friends, exhausted? Everyone's exhausted. And so it's really hard to understand the difference between what someone says or does that upsets you and what everything else that's going on in the world is doing to upset you. So that's the first thing, is you have to own the fact that regardless of what is happening right now, in this very moment, in this conversation, there's a lot of other stuff going on in your head. And that is going to color how you respond to things. And sometimes you're just not going to be up for whatever topic someone is going to bring to you. One of the best responses I got when I wanted to bring something very important to someone, they needed to help me through something. And the person responded, "This is important and we need to talk about this, but I am not in the right headspace to give you the kind of information that you need. Can we hold off on this and do this later?" And that was a prime, perfect example of owning your feelings and understanding that you're not in the right place for this. We talked about it later and it was great, but if he hadn't told me that, if he hadn't warned me and said, "All right, fine, let's talk about this, I'm not really in the mood," and then tuned out or just kind of phoned it in or not given me everything that I needed, that would have been a whole different outcome than him just saying, "You know what, not now, I've got too much going on. Let's talk about it later." So that's the first thing, is when you're owning your own feelings, if there is a way for you to delay a conversation until you are in a better headspace, that's the best option. The best option is, "I am not in the right space to talk about this right now. Can we try again later?" And sometimes the answer is yes, which is great. And sometimes the answer is no, which, I'm sure there are valid reasons for that. And so if the answer is no, you can say, "All right, just want you to know I'm exhausted. I'm a little hangry. Can we talk about this over food?" Right? Can we find a way to get me in a better headspace while we're doing this? That's another thing, that you just own the fact that you're not at your best. And maybe they'll change their mind. Maybe they'll say, "You know what? You're right. This is not the time to talk to you about it," which is great. But if they say, "Okay, no, there's no food available. There's no water. I know you're exhausted. We're just going to have to power through this." Then you're going to have to, do whatever you need to do to get through that conversation and then reflect on it later. And this is where it kind of ties back to the conversation from last week, where why couldn't it wait? Was it that they were just being selfish and needed something from you right away? That kind of crosses a boundary, doesn't it? Or was the situation just foisted upon you and you weren't given the option to kind of present what state of mind you were in and whether or not you were ready to have that conversation? Those kinds of things happen all the time. So if that happens, you are bound to overreact in a negative way, and you are bound to have very strong negative feelings. So later, while you're thinking about that conversation, because if you have strong negative feelings, chances are you're going to think about it a lot. That's the time to really analyze and say, okay, how much of that was me? How much of that was, I'm exhausted, I was hungry, there's too much going on, it was just a bad time, and how much of that was them crossing your boundaries? And then follow up on that and say, "You know what, I probably could have handled that situation better, but you didn't really give me much of a choice because of these boundaries that you crossed. So next time you want to have that kind of a conversation, can you please make sure that you respect my time, respect my energy," whatever the boundary is. But also own the fact that, yeah, you weren't at your best at that time. And that's okay. Nobody is always at their best. Nobody is always going to be fully aware of all of the baggage that they have in the back of their mind. Nobody is going to be fully aware of a word or a phrase or a topic that triggers something in the back of your head that just whooshes forward a whole bunch of terrible emotions that you weren't prepared for. Nobody else was prepared for it, and maybe you reacted really badly. That's unfortunate and it's not your fault, but it is on you to own. And that's the important thing, is you can say, wow, that got out of control. I don't really know where that came from. I'm still parsing that out, but I acknowledge that I could have handled that better. Let's talk about it when I'm in a better headspace or after I've had some time to process, right? All you have to do is acknowledge it. And then you have to do the work to figure out why you handled it badly. Sometimes you're just tired and hungry, or living in a global pandemic. Sometimes it is that simple. A lot of times it's not that simple. And that is where you have to dig deep and do a lot of the self-reflection work to understand where those negative responses came from. So that's what it means to own your feelings, is to increase your self-awareness of your state of mind pretty much at any given time. Do that quick self-check. Am I ready for this conversation? Am I ready to enter this room with these people in it? And if I'm not, what can I do about it? And if I can't do anything about it, how am I going to survive it? How am I going to get through it? How am I going to manage myself as best as I can? And if I handle it badly, how am I going to figure out how to have that conversation later and acknowledge it? So that's what I've got for us this week. I'd love to hear if there's a time that you learned much, much later that you needed to own your feelings and it wasn't someone else's fault that you got really angry. I think that would be a fun thing to talk about. So leave me something in the comments to share. Say, yeah, I was stupid hungry and had no idea, and I got into this really big fight with somebody, and then once I had food, I realized that they didn't do anything wrong. It was all me. How many times has that happened to you? I'd be interested to see. So that's what I've got for us this week, and I will see you next week.